Every detail has been researched, verified, and documented. Declassified Horror, the only channel that brings you true horror stories that have been cross-referenced with official documentation. These 9 verified accounts come from drivers who've never filed false reports, never been cited for safety violations, and have decades of combined experience on America's most dangerous mountain routes. Every story has been corroborated through police reports, DOT incident files, and CB radio transmission logs. Some of these drivers still refuse to take certain mountain routes. Several trucking companies have quietly blacklisted specific highway stretches after multiple driver reports. What you're about to hear defies explanation. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell if you want more spine-chilling true stories delivered every week. If you're a professional driver who's experienced something unexplained on mountain highways, drop it in the comments below. Every story gets investigated. Now, let's begin with our first account. Let's move to our first story. Our first account comes from Vincent Diesel McKenzie, a 28-year veteran of long-haul trucking with over 3.2 million miles of documented experience across North American highways. Known throughout the industry for his mechanical expertise and spotless safety record, Vincent had never filed an incident report that couldn't be explained through conventional means. He operated a 2019 Peterbilt 579 with a Cummins X15 engine that he'd personally maintained to manufacturer's specifications for over 400,000 miles without a single breakdown. On the night of October 15, 2023, at exactly 2:47 a.m., Vincent was hauling a load of automotive parts from Detroit to Charlotte when something happened that would challenge everything he thought he knew about machinery, death, and the laws of physics. Vincent had been running Interstate 79 through the heart of West Virginia's coal country, a route he'd traveled thousands of times over nearly 3 decades behind the wheel. The weather was clear with temperatures holding steady at 42 degrees. Perfect conditions for making good time through the Appalachian mountain passes. His logbook showed he was running well within federal hours of service regulations, with over 6 hours remaining on his 14-hour driving window. The cargo manifest documented 43,000 pounds of transmission components and engine blocks, bringing his gross vehicle weight to just under 78,000 pounds, well within DOT legal limits. Vincent's CB radio was tuned to Channel 19, monitoring trucker chatter about road conditions and bear reports, when he first heard what he later described to West Virginia State Police as an engine sound that shouldn't exist. At mile marker 67, approximately 15 miles north of the Beckley exit, Vincent began hearing what sounded like a second diesel engine running in perfect synchronization with his own Cummins X15. The sound seemed to be coming from directly beneath his cab, as if another engine was somehow mounted in the same compartment as his own. Vincent immediately checked his instrument cluster, oil pressure holding steady at 45 psi, coolant temperature at 180 degrees, turbo boost pressure normal, all systems showing green across the dashboard. He grabbed his CB handset and asked if any other drivers were running close enough for him to hear their engines. 3 different truckers responded from various positions along the highway, but none were within a mile of his location, according to their mile marker callouts. The mysterious engine sound continued, maintaining perfect RPM matching with his own power plant. Vincent decided to conduct what he called a rolling diagnostic while maintaining highway speed. He gradually reduced his accelerator pressure, watching as his tachometer dropped from 1,650 RPM down to 1,200 RPM. The phantom engine sound dropped in perfect unison, maintaining identical timing and frequency patterns. When he accelerated back to cruising speed, both engines, his own and the impossible duplicate, climbed together with mathematical precision. He tried shifting his 18-speed Eaton Fuller transmission through several gear changes, and the mysterious engine matched every shift point exactly. Most disturbing was that he could feel the additional power being generated. His onboard fuel economy computer showed consumption rates that were exactly double what they should be for his current gross weight and terrain conditions, as if his truck was somehow burning diesel fuel for 2 complete engines simultaneously. By mile marker 72, Vincent was experiencing what he described as mechanical terror beyond comprehension. He could hear both engines clearly, his own familiar Cummins X15 and an identical engine that seemed to exist in the same physical space. The phantom engine wasn't an echo or acoustic reflection. It was producing its own distinct mechanical vibrations that he could feel through the cab floor, steering wheel, and gear shifter. Most unnervingly, when he would coast down mountain grades with his real engine at idle RPM, he could still hear the second engine maintaining much higher RPMs, as if it was working independently under completely different load conditions. Vincent activated his Jake brake on a steep downgrade near mile marker 75, and while his actual engine's compression brake engaged with its characteristic rumbling exhaust note, the phantom engine continued running at full power, creating a mechanical contradiction that violated every law of physics he understood after 3 decades of professional driving. At 3:23 a.m., Vincent pulled into the Tamarack Service Plaza to investigate what he assumed had to be some kind of catastrophic mechanical malfunction. He performed a complete DOT standard pre-trip inspection, checking every component of his engine compartment with a high-powered LED flashlight. The Cummins X15 appeared completely normal in every way. Proper oil levels, no unusual fluid leaks, drive belts and radiator hoses in good condition, air intake system clear and unrestricted. He started the engine and raised the hood to observe its operation under direct visual inspection. His real engine ran perfectly smooth and steady, but he could still hear the second engine with absolute clarity and distinction. Standing directly in front of his truck with the hood raised, Vincent could distinguish between the 2 engine sounds, his actual Cummins running smooth and consistent, and the phantom engine that seemed to be operating from the exact same location but running under completely different mechanical conditions. Vincent contacted his fleet dispatcher via the Qualcomm satellite messaging system and reported a possible critical mechanical issue requiring immediate emergency roadside assistance. Within 45 minutes, a certified Cummins technician named Robert Hayes arrived from a 24-hour commercial truck repair facility in Beckley. Robert performed a complete electronic diagnostic scan using professional-grade computer diagnostic equipment, checking engine fault codes, performance parameters, and electronic control module data streams. Every reading came back within normal manufacturer specifications. Robert ran the engine through full RPM ranges, while monitoring exhaust gas temperatures, fuel injection timing, and turbocharger performance metrics. All systems showed perfect operational status. However, Robert later told West Virginia State Police investigators during their official inquiry that he could also clearly hear what sounded like a second diesel engine operating, though his advanced electronic diagnostic equipment detected only 1 functional power plant. The certified Cummins technician recommended that Vincent continue his scheduled route, stating that whatever was causing the auditory phenomenon wasn't affecting his truck's actual mechanical operation or safety systems. Vincent reluctantly agreed and departed the service plaza at 4:41 a.m., resuming his southbound journey on Interstate 79. The phantom engine immediately returned to perfect synchronization with his real Cummins, matching every gear shift, acceleration, and deceleration with impossible precision and timing. Vincent's CB radio began receiving unusual transmissions, snippets of conversations that seemed to be coming from his own voice, discussing routes and cargo loads he'd never hauled, talking to dispatchers he'd never worked for, referencing trucking companies he'd never been employed by. Several times throughout the night, he heard what sounded exactly like his own voice, giving detailed directions to other truckers about highway conditions and alternate routes at geographic locations where he'd never driven. At mile marker 89, approximately 40 miles south of his initial encounter with the phantom engine phenomenon, Vincent experienced what state police investigators would later classify as impossible mechanical failure, followed by impossible mechanical recovery. His actual Cummins X15 engine suddenly ceased completely without warning. Oil pressure dropped instantly to 0 psi. Coolant temperature spiked to over 250 degrees, and the engine shut down with the distinctive grinding sounds of catastrophic internal bearing damage. Vincent safely maneuvered his 80,000-pound combination vehicle to the highway shoulder, using remaining momentum and air brake pressure. However, the phantom engine continued running perfectly at idle speed, as if nothing whatsoever had happened to his real power plant. Vincent sat in his cab, listening to an engine that shouldn't exist, somehow powering a truck whose actual engine had just suffered complete and total mechanical destruction. Vincent attempted to restart his seized Cummins engine, knowing it was mechanically impossible, but desperately hoping he was experiencing some kind of bizarre electrical malfunction. When he turned the ignition key, his real engine started immediately and ran perfectly. Oil pressure returned to normal operating range. Coolant temperature dropping back to standard operating levels. No unusual noises or vibrations whatsoever. His electronic engine control module showed no stored fault codes or record of the catastrophic failure that had occurred just minutes earlier. Vincent's electronic driver logbook recorded no interruption in engine operation or idle time. Most disturbing was that he could now hear 3 distinct engines simultaneously. His original Cummins X15, the phantom engine that had been running since mile marker 67, and what sounded like a third engine that had the distinctive acoustic characteristics of a severely damaged power plant running on failed internal components and destroyed bearings. Vincent completed his scheduled delivery to Charlotte without any further mechanical incidents. But the phantom engines continued running in perfect coordination until he reached his destination at 11:15 a.m. on October 15th. When he shut down his actual Cummins engine in the customer's receiving dock parking area, all phantom engine sounds ceased immediately and completely. Vincent's mandatory post-trip inspection revealed absolutely no mechanical problems whatsoever with any truck systems. His fuel purchase receipts showed diesel consumption rates that were nearly double normal levels for his route and cargo weight, completely consistent with operating multiple engines simultaneously for over 8 hours of continuous driving. Vincent immediately reported the incident to his company safety department, the Department of Transportation, and West Virginia State Police. Official investigation records show that 3 other professional drivers reported similar phantom engine phenomena on Interstate 79 through the same stretch of West Virginia mountains during October 2023. All 4 drivers operated different truck makes and models with different engine manufacturers and specifications. None of the reported phantom engines could be detected by electronic diagnostic equipment. But all drivers experienced identical fuel consumption anomalies and mechanical impossibilities that defied conventional scientific explanation. Vincent McKenzie continues driving professionally, but absolutely refuses to run Interstate 79 through West Virginia after sunset hours. His detailed incident report remains permanently on file with the West Virginia Department of Transportation as an unexplained mechanical phenomenon that was directly witnessed by a certified technician and corroborated through fuel consumption records and electronic logbook data that cannot be explained through any conventional mechanical analysis or scientific understanding. Let's move to our second story. Our second account comes from Amanda Torres, a female owner-operator with 12 years of experience running specialized freight across the eastern United States. Known throughout the trucking community for her professional demeanor and meticulous attention to DOT regulations, Amanda operated a 2020 Kenworth W900 with a CAT C-15 engine and maintained an impeccable safety rating, with 0 violations on her PSP report. She specialized in hauling oversized machinery and had never missed a delivery deadline in over a decade of independent trucking. On the night of September 3, 2023, at exactly 11:58 p.m., Amanda was running a permitted oversized load through the Kentucky mountains when she encountered something at a remote way station that would make her question everything she thought she knew about highway infrastructure and government oversight. Amanda had been hauling a 16-foot-wide industrial generator from Louisville to a power plant construction site in eastern Tennessee, running U.S. Route 119 through the heart of Kentucky coal country. Her oversized load permit required her to travel only during nighttime hours and mandated stops at specific way stations for inspection and measurement verification. The weather was clear with temperatures at 38 degrees, perfect conditions for transporting oversized cargo through the narrow mountain highways. Her permit paperwork was current and properly displayed, her escort vehicles were in position, and her gross combination weight was documented at 142,000 pounds, with all axle weights within legal tolerances. Amanda's CB radio was monitoring Channel 19 for traffic updates when she approached the Hazard County Way Station at mile marker 23, a facility she'd used dozens of times over the years for permit verification and DOT compliance checks. The way station appeared exactly as Amanda remembered from previous stops, a single-story concrete building with large windows, electronic scales capable of handling oversized loads, and adequate parking for permit verification procedures. The overhead electronic sign displayed "Open, all trucks must enter" in bright LED letters visible from over a mile away. Amanda activated her 4-way flashers and began the mandatory approach procedure, radioing her escort vehicles to maintain proper positioning during the weighing process. As she guided her oversized combination onto the certified scales, she noticed that the facility seemed unusually busy for nearly midnight on a weeknight. With multiple DOT enforcement officers visible through the building windows and several official vehicles parked in the inspection area, a uniformed way station attendant emerged from the building and approached Amanda's cab with a clipboard and digital tablet, standard procedure for oversized load verification. The attendant appeared to be in his mid-50s, wearing a properly pressed Kentucky DOT uniform with all required insignia and identification badges clearly visible. He introduced himself as Inspector Charles Morrison, badge number 4471, and began the routine verification process by requesting Amanda's commercial driver's license, medical card, logbook, and oversized load permits. Amanda provided all requested documentation, noting that Inspector Morrison handled her paperwork with the professional efficiency she'd come to expect from experienced DOT personnel during her years of oversized hauling. However, as Inspector Morrison reviewed her documentation, he began asking questions that went far beyond standard permit verification procedures. He inquired about Amanda's daughter Maria, specifically asking about her recent graduation from Eastern Kentucky University with a degree in mechanical engineering. Amanda was initially impressed by the inspector's attention to detail, assuming he was making conversation to put her at ease during the inspection process. But then Inspector Morrison asked about Amanda's mother Carmen, mentioning her recent diagnosis with type 2 diabetes and her struggles with prescription medication costs. He asked about Amanda's brother Miguel, referencing his recent divorce proceedings and child custody arrangements that hadn't been finalized by the courts. Amanda became increasingly uncomfortable as Inspector Morrison continued demonstrating impossible knowledge about her personal life and family circumstances. He mentioned her daughter's student loan debt, totaling exactly $47,832, her mother's specific medication regimen, including metformin and insulin injections, and her brother's custody hearing scheduled for September 15th in Jefferson County Family Court. Most disturbing was his knowledge of Amanda's own financial situation, including her truck payment balance of $78,450, her outstanding permit fees with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, and her plans to purchase a second truck within the next 6 months to expand her owner-operator business. Inspector Morrison then began discussing Amanda's driving history with supernatural accuracy, mentioning specific loads she'd hauled, routes she'd traveled, and customers she'd worked with over the past several years. He referenced a delivery she'd made to a steel mill in Gary, Indiana, 18 months earlier, correctly stating the exact weight and dimensions of the structural beams she'd transported. He mentioned a breakdown she'd experienced near Memphis in 2021, accurately describing the bearing failure in her trailer tandems and the specific repair shop that had performed the emergency roadside service. He knew about a minor logbook violation she'd received in Virginia 3 years prior, correctly quoting the specific regulation number and fine amount that weren't part of any public record system. Most unnervingly, Inspector Morrison began discussing events that hadn't happened yet, but would occur during Amanda's current trip. He warned her about a bridge construction project on Route 27 in Tennessee that would require a last-minute route change, mentioning specific alternate highways that weren't listed on her current permit routing. He advised her to check her right rear trailer tires at her next fuel stop, stating that she would discover a nail puncture that could cause a dangerous blowout if not addressed immediately. He mentioned that her delivery customer would request a specific positioning of the generator that wasn't detailed in her shipping instructions but would be critical for their installation timeline. Amanda asked Inspector Morrison how he could possibly know such detailed information about her personal and professional life. He responded that the Kentucky Department of Transportation maintained comprehensive databases on all commercial drivers operating in the state, including financial records, family information, and detailed shipping histories. He explained that modern enforcement technology allowed DOT personnel to access real-time data about truckers' lives to ensure proper oversight and safety compliance. However, Amanda had been an owner-operator for over a decade and knew that no such database existed or would be legally permissible under federal privacy regulations. Inspector Morrison completed his inspection procedures and returned Amanda's documentation, marking her permits as approved for continued travel through Kentucky. He wished her safe travels and reminded her to be particularly cautious on the mountain descents ahead, mentioning that fog would develop around 2:30 a.m. and would create dangerous visibility conditions near the Tennessee border. As Amanda prepared to depart the way station, she asked Inspector Morrison for his business card in case she needed to reference the inspection later. He provided a standard Kentucky DOT business card with his name, badge number, and contact information printed in regulation format. Amanda resumed her journey at 12:47 a.m., but the encounter with Inspector Morrison continued troubling her throughout the remainder of her trip. Every prediction he'd made began coming true with disturbing accuracy. The bridge construction on Route 27 required exactly the route change he'd described, using alternate highways that perfectly matched his recommendations. At her fuel stop in Pikeville, she discovered the nail puncture in her right rear trailer tire exactly as he'd predicted, potentially saving her from a dangerous blowout on mountain highways. Her delivery customer did indeed request the specific generator positioning that Inspector Morrison had mentioned, information that should have been impossible for him to know in advance. Most disturbing was Inspector Morrison's prediction about fog conditions. At exactly 2:30 a.m., thick fog developed near the Tennessee border, creating visibility conditions so dangerous that Amanda was forced to pull over and wait for atmospheric conditions to improve. The fog lasted for nearly 2 hours, matching Inspector Morrison's time-frame predictions with supernatural precision. Amanda used the delay to call the Kentucky DOT main office, requesting verification of Inspector Morrison's employment and the way station's overnight operating schedule. The Kentucky Department of Transportation dispatcher informed Amanda that the Hazard County Way Station had been permanently closed for renovations since August 15, 2023, and was not scheduled to reopen until November 1, 2023. No DOT personnel were assigned to the facility during the closure period, and no inspections were being conducted at that location. The dispatcher confirmed that no employee named Charles Morrison was currently working for the Kentucky DOT, and badge number 4471 had been retired from service in 2019. Most significantly, the electronic scales at the Hazard County facility had been removed for recalibration and wouldn't be capable of weighing oversized loads until the renovation project was completed. Amanda completed her delivery successfully, but immediately filed a formal report with the Kentucky State Police and the Department of Transportation regarding her encounter at the supposedly closed way station. Investigation records show that Amanda's CB radio communications with her escort vehicles were recorded and confirmed that she had indeed stopped at the Hazard County facility for nearly 45 minutes during the time period she claimed. However, facility security cameras showed no activity at the closed way station during September 3, 2023. The business card Inspector Morrison had provided contained accurate Kentucky DOT formatting and security features, but the contact information led to a phone number that had been disconnected for over 4 years. Kentucky State Police investigators discovered that Amanda wasn't the first trucker to report encounters with DOT personnel at permanently closed facilities. 3 other commercial drivers had filed similar reports involving the same Hazard County way station during its closure period, all describing interactions with uniformed inspectors who demonstrated impossible knowledge about their personal lives and made accurate predictions about their upcoming travels. All encounters occurred between 11:45 p.m. and 1:15 a.m., and all truckers received business cards with contact information that led to disconnected phone numbers and retired badge numbers. Amanda Torres continues operating as an owner-operator, but now travels alternate routes to avoid the Hazard County Way Station. Her detailed incident report remains under active investigation by the Kentucky State Police and has been forwarded to federal transportation security authorities as part of an ongoing inquiry into unexplained phenomena at closed DOT facilities throughout the Appalachian region. Let's move to our third story. Our third account comes from Marcus Big Bear Jackson, a 22-year veteran long-haul trucker with over 2.8 million miles of documented experience hauling specialized freight across the continental United States. Known throughout the industry for his reliability and attention to cargo security protocols, Marcus operated a 2018 Freightliner Cascadia with a Detroit DD-15 engine and maintained perfect on-time delivery records with multiple transportation brokers. He specialized in hauling high-value electronics and pharmaceutical products that required strict chain-of-custody documentation and temperature-controlled environments. On the night of July 28, 2023, at approximately 3:33 a.m., Marcus was dispatched to pick up an emergency freight shipment in Virginia's coal country when he encountered cargo that would challenge everything he understood about physics, reality, and the nature of transportation itself. Marcus had been deadheading through southwestern Virginia after completing a delivery of medical equipment to a hospital in Bristol when his dispatcher contacted him via satellite communication with an urgent pickup opportunity. The load originated from a pharmaceutical distribution facility located on a remote industrial road near the town of Wise, Virginia, deep in the Appalachian coal mining region. The shipment manifest indicated 38,500 pounds of temperature-sensitive medical supplies destined for research laboratories in Atlanta, Georgia, with a delivery requirement of less than 18 hours from pickup to final destination. The freight rate was unusually high for the mileage involved, nearly double the standard rate per mile. But Marcus had worked with this particular broker before and assumed the premium was due to the emergency nature and time-sensitive requirements of the pharmaceutical cargo. Marcus arrived at the pickup facility at 4:15 a.m. A modern concrete warehouse complex surrounded by security fencing and equipped with multiple loading docks designed for temperature-controlled freight. The facility appeared legitimate and professional, with proper pharmaceutical distribution licensing displayed at the security checkpoint and uniformed personnel managing the loading operations. A shipping coordinator named David Chen provided Marcus with a complete bill of lading, hazmat documentation, and temperature monitoring instructions for the controlled atmosphere trailer he was pulling. The paperwork indicated that the cargo consisted of experimental medications requiring constant refrigeration at exactly 38 degrees Fahrenheit, with real-time temperature monitoring throughout the transit period. The loading process took approximately 45 minutes, with facility personnel using electric forklifts to position 12 identical shipping containers onto Marcus's refrigerated trailer. Each container was sealed with tamper-evident security devices and labeled with pharmaceutical tracking numbers, FDA approval codes, and handling instructions printed in multiple languages. Marcus performed his standard post-loading inspection, verifying that all containers were properly secured with load bars and cargo straps, checking that his reefer unit was maintaining proper temperature, and confirming that all required documentation was complete and properly executed. The gross vehicle weight measured 78,200 pounds on the facility's certified scale, well within legal limits for his truck and trailer combination. Marcus departed the pharmaceutical facility at 5:23 a.m. and began his journey south through Virginia toward Georgia, following Interstate 23 through the mountainous terrain of the Appalachian region. His refrigerated trailer was maintaining perfect temperature control at 38 degrees. His fuel levels were adequate for the 420-mile journey, and his electronic logbook showed sufficient driving hours remaining to complete the delivery within the required time frame. However, approximately 30 miles south of the pickup location, Marcus began noticing unusual characteristics about his cargo that didn't align with his experience hauling pharmaceutical products over the past 2 decades of specialized freight transportation. The first anomaly Marcus observed was related to the cargo's weight distribution and handling characteristics. Despite his trailer scales showing a gross weight of 38,500 pounds of freight, his truck was handling as if the trailer was completely empty. On uphill grades, where he should have been downshifting and experiencing reduced acceleration due to the heavy load, his Detroit engine was pulling effortlessly at highway speeds without any increase in turbo boost pressure or exhaust gas temperatures. When descending mountain grades, his trailer brakes weren't engaging with the resistance patterns he expected from hauling nearly 40,000 pounds of pharmaceutical containers, and his truck was maintaining speeds that suggested virtually no cargo weight whatsoever. The second disturbing characteristic involved sounds emanating from within his sealed refrigerated trailer. Marcus began hearing what he described as movement patterns that didn't match the cargo manifest. Instead of the typical shifting sounds of secured containers during normal highway travel, he was hearing rhythmic tapping, scratching noises against the trailer walls, and what sounded like muffled vocalizations that couldn't possibly be coming from pharmaceutical supplies. The sounds were most noticeable during periods of highway vibration caused by rough pavement or when navigating sharp curves through mountain passes. Marcus initially attributed the noises to inadequate cargo securement by the loading facility, but the sounds continued to intensify and develop patterns that suggested intentional communication rather than random container movement. At a truck stop near the town of Norton, Virginia, Marcus contacted his dispatcher to report potential cargo securement issues and request permission to inspect his load to ensure proper transportation safety. However, When he called the contact number provided on his original dispatch instructions, the phone number was disconnected with no forwarding information available. Marcus then attempted to contact the pharmaceutical distribution facility where he'd picked up the freight, but the phone numbers on his bill of lading led to recordings stating that the numbers were no longer in service. Most concerning was his discovery that the pharmaceutical company listed on his shipping documentation didn't appear in any federal database of licensed medical supply distributors. Marcus decided to conduct a visual inspection of his cargo by opening the rear doors of his refrigerated trailer. However, when he attempted to unlock the trailer doors using the seal numbers provided in his documentation, he discovered that the security seals couldn't be removed using standard procedures. The tamper-evident devices appeared to be fused to the door hardware in ways that defied conventional manufacturing processes. More disturbing was his observation that the trailer's interior temperature gauge was reading 38 degrees as required. But when he placed his hand near the door seals, he could feel warm air escaping from inside the trailer, suggesting that his reefer unit was working to cool something that was generating significant heat production. As Marcus continued his journey through the Virginia mountains, the sounds from within his trailer became increasingly distinct and troubling. He began hearing what sounded like human voices engaged in conversation, speaking in languages he couldn't identify, but with speech patterns that suggested intelligence and purposeful communication. The voices would respond to external stimuli, becoming louder and more agitated when Marcus used his air horn or CB radio, and falling silent when he reduced his speed or drove through tunnels. Most unnervingly, the voices seemed to be aware of his driving patterns and route selections, becoming more active when he approached truck stops or way stations, as if the cargo was somehow conscious of their travel progress and destination. At mile marker 47 on Interstate 23, Marcus experienced what he later described as impossible cargo behavior that violated the laws of physics. While navigating a sharp right-hand curve at approximately 45 miles per hour, he felt his trailer weight suddenly shift to the left side in a pattern that suggested his cargo was moving independently of the truck's motion and the effects of centrifugal force. The weight shift was so dramatic that Marcus had to counter-steer to maintain control of his combination vehicle, and he could hear his cargo containers sliding across the trailer floor despite being secured with heavy-duty load restraints that should have prevented any movement whatsoever. Marcus pulled into a rest area to investigate the cargo shifting issue, but when he examined his load, securement equipment, he found that all cargo straps and load bars remained properly positioned and under correct tension. However, his trailer's weight distribution had clearly changed, with his tandems showing different axle weights than when he departed from the pickup facility. According to his onboard scale system, his cargo had somehow redistributed itself within the sealed trailer in ways that defied the physical constraints of the shipping containers and the trailer's internal dimensions. When Marcus attempted to contact law enforcement to report potential cargo security issues, he discovered that his CB radio, cell phone, and satellite communication system were receiving interference that prevented him from establishing contact with any outside parties. Radio transmissions would begin normally, but would be interrupted by the same unidentified voices he was hearing from within his trailer, speaking over official emergency frequencies and preventing him from completing distress calls. His electronic logging device was also malfunctioning, showing impossible mileage calculations and route information that didn't correspond to his actual travel patterns or geographic location. At approximately 2:15 a.m., Marcus made the decision to abandon his delivery and seek assistance from law enforcement authorities. He exited Interstate 23 at the town of Pound, Virginia, and drove directly to the Wise County Sheriff's Office to report what he believed was a potential human trafficking situation involving his cargo. However, When deputies accompanied Marcus to examine his trailer, they found that his refrigerated unit was maintaining proper temperature. His cargo appeared properly secured, and his shipping documentation seemed legitimate and complete. Most significantly, the trailer was completely silent with no evidence of the voices or movement that Marcus had been experiencing throughout his journey. The Wise County Sheriff's deputies requested that Marcus open his trailer for a complete cargo inspection. But when they cut the security seals and opened the rear doors, they discovered that the trailer was completely empty. There were no pharmaceutical containers, no shipping materials, no evidence that any cargo had ever been loaded into the refrigerated compartment. The trailer's interior showed no signs of recent use, with no tie-down marks on the floor, no residue from shipping labels, and no indication that freight had been transported. Marcus's bill of lading, shipping manifest, and all related paperwork had become blank documents with no printing, signatures, or official markings of any kind. The Wise County Sheriff's Office investigation revealed that the pharmaceutical distribution facility where Marcus claimed to have picked up his cargo had been permanently closed since March 2023, with no business operations or personnel present at the location for over 4 months. The facility's former owners confirmed that no freight shipments had originated from that location since their closure, and no pharmaceutical products had been stored or distributed from the warehouse since their business license had expired. Security camera footage from the facility showed no truck activity during the time period when Marcus claimed to have loaded his cargo. Marcus Jackson's incident report has been forwarded to the Virginia State Police and Federal Transportation Authorities as part of an ongoing investigation into fraudulent freight operations in the Appalachian region. His electronic logging device data has been analyzed by DOT investigators, who confirmed that his truck had indeed traveled the routes he described. But his trailer's weight sensors showed no cargo loading or unloading events during the time period in question. Marcus continues driving professionally, but now requires physical verification of all cargo and direct contact with shippers before accepting any freight assignments in the Virginia Mountain region. Let's move to our fourth story. Our fourth account comes from Danny Rodriguez, a team driver with 9 years of experience running time-sensitive freight across the eastern United States. Known for his technical expertise with CB radio communications and his ability to navigate complex mountain routes using trucker network guidance. Danny operated a 2021 Volvo VNL with a D13 engine as part of a husband and wife team operation with his partner Lisa. They specialized in expedited automotive parts delivery that required precise timing and constant communication with dispatch centers and other drivers. On the night of November 7th, 2023, at exactly 1:22 a.m., Danny was navigating the Interstate 77 tunnel systems through the Virginia-West Virginia border when his CB radio began receiving transmissions that would challenge everything he understood about radio communication, geographic reality, and the nature of the mountain highways he'd traveled for nearly a decade. Danny and Lisa had been hauling a load of transmission assemblies from a Ford manufacturing plant in Dearborn, Michigan, to distribution centers throughout the southeastern United States, running their typical route through the Appalachian corridor to maximize fuel efficiency and minimize travel time. Lisa was sleeping in the sleeper berth, while Danny handled the overnight driving shift, maintaining their team operation schedule that allowed them to cover 1,100 miles in a single day, while remaining compliant with federal hours of service regulations. The weather conditions were ideal for mountain driving, with clear skies, temperatures at 44 degrees, and no precipitation forecast for their route through the tunnel systems that connected Virginia and West Virginia through some of the most challenging terrain in the Appalachian region. Danny's CB radio setup was more sophisticated than most professional drivers utilized. Featuring a Cobra 29LX radio with a high-gain antenna system and external speaker configuration that allowed him to monitor multiple channels simultaneously, while maintaining clear communication with other truckers and emergency services. He typically monitored Channel 19 for general trucker communications, Channel 9 for emergency traffic, and Channel 17 for local traffic reports and road condition updates. His radio equipment had been professionally installed and tuned for optimal performance in mountainous terrain, where radio signals could be unpredictable due to topographic interference and atmospheric conditions common to high-elevation highway corridors. As Danny entered the Big Walker Mountain Tunnel on Interstate 77, his CB radio began receiving transmissions on Channel 13, a frequency he typically used for communicating with other team drivers and coordinating parking at truck stops. However, the voices he began hearing weren't discussing typical trucking topics like fuel prices, parking availability, or road conditions. Instead, he was hearing what sounded like detailed directions to geographic locations that didn't correspond to any highways, exits, or landmarks he recognized from his years of experience running routes through Virginia and West Virginia. The transmissions were crystal clear, with no static or interference, which was unusual for CB communications in tunnel environments where radio signals normally experienced significant degradation or complete loss. The first transmission Danny clearly understood was a male voice providing specific directions. Take the next right at the stone bridge marker. Follow the gravel access road for exactly 2.7 miles until you reach the abandoned mining equipment. Then turn left at the rusted conveyor structure and proceed to the loading area behind the equipment shed. Danny immediately recognized that these directions didn't correspond to any legitimate trucking route or delivery location. There were no stone bridge markers on Interstate 77, no gravel access roads accessible to commercial vehicles, and no abandoned mining equipment visible from any highway in the area. The directions were impossibly specific and referenced landmarks that simply didn't exist along his current route. Additional transmissions continued throughout Danny's passage through the tunnel system, with multiple voices providing increasingly detailed instructions for reaching locations that seemed to exist in an alternate version of the Appalachian landscape. One transmission directed drivers to follow the creek bed road past the 3 red barns until you reach the covered bridge. Then take the left fork toward the settlement with the white church steeple. Another voice provided coordinates for the loading dock behind the company store near the railroad water tower, just past where the tracks cross over the hollow. These descriptions referenced rural infrastructure elements that were historically accurate for Appalachian communities, but didn't correspond to any existing locations accessible by commercial trucking routes. Danny attempted to respond to the mysterious transmissions by keying his microphone and asking for clarification about the directions being provided. Immediately after his transmission, all voices on Channel 13 fell completely silent, creating dead air that lasted for several minutes. However, when the transmissions resumed, Danny heard his own voice providing directions to locations he'd never seen, using his exact speech patterns and vocabulary, but describing routes he'd never traveled and destinations he'd never visited. His recorded voice was giving other drivers detailed instructions for navigating to the fuel depot past the 3 silos where the road splits near the old tipple, and the truck wash facility behind the brick buildings where the mountain road comes down from the ridge. Most disturbing was hearing his own voice providing personal information about other drivers that he couldn't possibly know. His recorded voice was telling truckers about family, emergencies, financial problems, and personal situations with a level of accuracy and detail that suggested access to private information from their personal lives. Danny heard his voice warning a driver about his wife's medical condition that would require immediate hospitalization, advising another trucker about legal problems involving his commercial driver's license that hadn't been publicly disclosed, and providing specific instructions about avoiding law enforcement checkpoints that were being established at locations and times that wouldn't be announced until the following day. Danny woke his partner Lisa and asked her to monitor the CB transmissions while he focused on navigating through the tunnel systems and mountain grades. Lisa immediately confirmed that she could hear the mysterious directions and conversations. But she also began hearing her own voice, participating in discussions about trucking routes and driver situations she'd never been involved with. Her recorded voice was providing advice to female drivers about dealing with harassment at truck stops, discussing mechanical problems with trailer refrigeration units that she'd never experienced, and offering guidance about navigating weight station procedures in states where she'd never driven commercially. As Danny emerged from the tunnel system onto the West Virginia side of Interstate 77, the CB transmissions began directing him to take specific exits and follow particular routes that weren't part of his planned journey to the southeastern distribution centers. The voices provided exit numbers, mile marker references, and highway designations that corresponded to real locations on his route. But the destinations they were describing didn't match any legitimate trucking facilities or customer locations. One transmission specifically instructed him to take exit 42 in 3 miles, follow Route 16 south for 12 miles to the intersection with the unmarked Forest Service Road, then proceed to the communications facility at the base of the radio tower. Danny verified his current location using his GPS navigation system and confirmed that exit 42 did exist ahead on Interstate 77, and Route 16 was indeed a legitimate state highway accessible from that exit. However, his mapping software showed no communications facilities, radio towers, or forest service roads in the area described by the CB transmissions. Despite his better judgment, Danny's curiosity about the impossible accuracy of some transmission details led him to take exit 42 and follow Route 16 to investigate whether the described locations actually existed in some form. Route 16 led Danny through increasingly remote mountainous terrain with no commercial facilities, truck stops, or services suitable for commercial vehicles. After driving exactly 12 miles as directed by the CB transmissions, Danny reached an intersection with an unmarked gravel road that wasn't shown on his GPS mapping system or any official highway atlas. The road appeared to be maintained for vehicle traffic and showed recent tire tracks from heavy trucks, suggesting that other commercial drivers had followed the same mysterious directions. Against his professional instincts about operating commercial vehicles on unauthorized roadways, Danny decided to investigate the gravel road to determine where it led and whether any legitimate trucking facilities existed at the location described in the CB transmissions. The unmarked road led through dense forest terrain for approximately 4.2 miles before reaching a cleared area containing a complex of buildings, communication towers, and what appeared to be a truck parking facility capable of accommodating multiple tractor-trailer combinations. The facility had no visible signage, company identification, or official markings of any kind. But it was clearly designed for commercial trucking operations with concrete parking pads, electrical hookups, and fuel dispensing equipment. Most significantly, there were 6 other commercial trucks parked at the facility, all with out-of-state license plates and all operated by drivers who appeared to be confused about how they had arrived at the location. Danny parked his truck and approached the other drivers to inquire about the facility and its purpose. Every driver reported the same experience. They had been following normal trucking routes through the Appalachian region when their CB radios began receiving detailed directions to the unmarked facility. All drivers had heard their own voices providing guidance and information on CB frequencies, and all had been directed to take the same series of exits and unmarked roads that led to the facility. None of the drivers could identify the purpose of the facility, locate any personnel or management, or determine how to leave the location using conventional navigation methods. Most disturbing was the discovery that all CB radios at the facility continued receiving transmissions, But now the voices were providing detailed information about the drivers' families, personal finances, and private situations that couldn't possibly be known by other truckers or CB radio operators. The transmissions included specific instructions about contacting family members, making business decisions, and handling personal matters that were scheduled to occur in the following weeks and months. Several drivers reported that the CB voices had provided accurate predictions about mechanical problems, delivery delays, and route changes that had occurred exactly as described during their journeys to the facility. Danny and Lisa attempted to leave the facility using the same route they had followed to arrive, but their GPS navigation system couldn't locate their current position and was unable to provide directions back to Interstate 77. Their CB radio continued receiving transmissions with increasingly detailed instructions. But now, the voices were directing them to remain at the facility for processing and documentation procedures that would be conducted by personnel who would arrive at an unspecified time. The other drivers reported similar experiences, with their navigation systems failing to function properly and their CB radios providing contradictory directions that seemed designed to prevent them from leaving the area. After several hours at the facility, Danny decided to ignore the CB radio directions and attempt to return to Interstate 77 by retracing the route they had followed. However, the unmarked gravel road that had led them to the facility was no longer accessible, appearing to end at a rocky embankment that showed no evidence of recent vehicle traffic. Danny and Lisa were eventually able to locate an alternate route back to legitimate state highways. But their experience at the facility had lasted over 6 hours, according to their electronic logging devices, while their truck's hour meter showed only 47 minutes of idle time during their stop. Danny Rodriguez filed a detailed report with the West Virginia State Police and the Federal Communications Commission regarding the CB radio transmissions that had led him to the unmarked facility. FCC investigation records show that no licensed radio operators were transmitting on the frequencies Danny had monitored, and no communication facilities were authorized to operate at the location he described. The West Virginia State Police investigation could not locate the facility using the coordinates and directions provided in Danny's report, and aerial surveillance of the area showed no structures or cleared land consistent with his description of the truck parking complex. Danny and Lisa continue operating as team drivers, but now avoid CB radio communications in mountainous terrain and rely exclusively on satellite communication systems for coordination with dispatch and other drivers. Their incident report remains under investigation by federal transportation and communication authorities as part of a broader inquiry into unauthorized radio transmissions affecting commercial drivers in the Appalachian region. Let's move to our fifth story. Our fifth account comes from Rebecca Stone, an independent trucker with 15 years of experience hauling refrigerated freight across the Midwest and Eastern United States. Known throughout the cold chain transportation industry for her exceptional maintenance standards and emergency preparedness protocols, Rebecca operated a 2019 Mack Anthem with a MP8 engine pulling a state-of-the-art utility reefer trailer equipped with multi-zone temperature controls and GPS tracking systems. She specialized in transporting frozen foods and pharmaceuticals that required precise temperature management, and had never experienced a cargo loss due to equipment failure in her decade and a half of professional driving. On the night of December 22, 2023, at exactly 4:15 a.m. during a severe winter storm, Rebecca was hauling a load of frozen medical supplies through remote West Virginia mountains when her truck suffered a catastrophic breakdown that would lead to an encounter with emergency responders who shouldn't have existed. Rebecca had been running a high-priority load of insulin shipments from a pharmaceutical distribution center in Cleveland, Ohio, to emergency medical facilities throughout the southeastern states, following Route 52 through the mountainous terrain of southern West Virginia, where winter weather conditions were particularly treacherous. A severe blizzard had developed during her overnight run, with temperatures dropping to -8 degrees Fahrenheit, winds gusting to 45 miles per hour, and snowfall accumulating at nearly 3 inches per hour. Despite the dangerous conditions, Rebecca was maintaining legal speeds and proper following distances, while her reefer trailer held steady at -10 degrees, to preserve the critical medical cargo that diabetes patients throughout the region desperately needed during the holiday season. At mile marker 34 on Route 52, approximately 18 miles from the nearest town of Welch, West Virginia, Rebecca's truck began experiencing what she initially diagnosed as fuel system problems related to the extreme cold temperatures. Her engine started running rough with irregular RPM fluctuations, her fuel pressure gauge showed intermittent low readings, and her exhaust temperature began climbing beyond normal operating parameters. Rebecca activated her hazard flashers and began looking for a safe location to pull over and investigate the mechanical issues. But the blizzard conditions had made the narrow mountain highway extremely dangerous, with snowdrifts building across travel lanes and visibility reduced to less than 50 feet in any direction. Before Rebecca could locate a suitable stopping area, her Mack engine suffered complete power loss and shut down entirely, leaving her with no propulsion, no power steering, and limited electrical systems while traveling at 35 miles per hour on a steep mountain grade during whiteout conditions. She managed to guide her 80,000-pound combination vehicle to the shoulder using momentum and engine compression braking. But her truck came to rest in an extremely precarious position on a narrow shoulder with steep drop-offs on both sides and no protection from passing traffic that might not see her disabled vehicle in the blizzard conditions. Her reefer trailer's diesel-powered refrigeration unit continued operating normally, maintaining proper temperature for her medical cargo. But her main engine was completely dead, with no response to restart attempts. Rebecca immediately activated her emergency communication protocols, using her CB radio to broadcast distress calls on Channel 9, while simultaneously attempting to contact emergency services through her cell phone and satellite communication systems. However, the severe weather conditions and mountainous terrain were interfering with all communication methods, preventing her from establishing contact with her dispatcher, emergency services, or other truckers who might be able to provide assistance. Her GPS tracking system showed her exact location, but she was unable to transmit her coordinates to any outside parties due to the communication blackout caused by the storm and the remote geographic location. After nearly 2 hours of unsuccessful communication attempts and repeated failure to restart her engine, Rebecca observed headlights approaching through the blizzard from the direction she had been traveling. A convoy of 3 emergency response vehicles pulled up behind her disabled truck, including what appeared to be a heavy-duty tow truck, a service van equipped with emergency lighting, and a crew cab pickup truck with official markings. The vehicles were equipped with powerful spotlights that illuminated her truck and provided much-needed visibility in the dangerous weather conditions. Rebecca was initially relieved to see emergency responders arriving so quickly, despite the remote location and severe weather that should have prevented normal emergency services from reaching her position. The emergency response team consisted of 4 uniformed personnel who introduced themselves as members of the West Virginia Department of Transportation Emergency Road Service Division. The team leader, identified as Supervisor William Hayes, badge number 2847, explained that they had received her distress signals through their emergency monitoring systems and had been dispatched to provide immediate assistance to prevent her medical cargo from being compromised by the extreme weather conditions. The team appeared professional and well-equipped for winter emergency operations, with proper cold weather gear, communication equipment, and specialized tools for handling disabled commercial vehicles in hazardous conditions. However, as Supervisor Hayes and his team began their assessment of Rebecca's disabled truck, she began noticing unusual characteristics about their equipment and procedures that didn't align with her experience with legitimate emergency road services. Their tow truck appeared to be significantly older than current DOT fleet vehicles, but was in pristine mechanical condition, with no signs of wear or aging, despite what appeared to be decades of heavy use. The emergency lighting systems on their vehicles used incandescent bulbs and mechanical flasher units, rather than the LED technology and electronic controls that had been standard on emergency vehicles for over a decade. Most significantly, the emergency response team demonstrated knowledge about Rebecca's truck that was impossible for them to possess without access to detailed maintenance records and manufacturer specifications. Supervisor Hayes correctly identified her engine as a 2019 Mack MP8 with specific horsepower and torque ratings, mentioned her recent maintenance history, including a preventive service performed 3 weeks earlier in Toledo, Ohio, and referenced warranty work that had been completed on her transmission the previous summer. He knew that her reefer trailer was carrying insulin shipments with specific temperature requirements and delivery deadlines, information that should have been confidential and unavailable to DOT emergency personnel. The emergency response team began working on Rebecca's disabled engine using diagnostic equipment and repair techniques that seemed remarkably advanced for roadside emergency service. They connected computerized testing devices that appeared more sophisticated than equipment available at most truck dealerships. And they demonstrated expertise with her truck's electronic systems that exceeded what she would expect from general emergency personnel. Within 45 minutes, they had identified the problem as a failure in her fuel system's electronic control module, a component that typically required dealer-level diagnostic equipment and specialized software to properly diagnose and repair. Most unnervingly, the emergency team produced a replacement electronic control module that was an exact match for Rebecca's engine specifications, complete with proper Mack part numbers and manufacturing codes. Supervisor Hayes explained that their emergency service division maintained extensive inventories of critical truck components to ensure rapid repairs for commercial vehicles carrying essential cargo during emergency conditions. However, Rebecca knew that electronic control modules were unique to specific engine configurations and weren't commonly stocked items that emergency services would carry for random roadside repairs. The installation of the replacement component required approximately 90 minutes of work, during which the emergency team demonstrated mechanical expertise that far exceeded typical roadside assistance capabilities. They performed complete electronic programming of the new control module, synchronized it with Rebecca's engine management systems, and conducted comprehensive diagnostic testing to ensure proper operation. Throughout the repair process, they worked efficiently. Despite the blizzard conditions, using portable lighting and heating equipment that allowed them to maintain comfortable working conditions even in the extreme weather. When the repair work was completed, Rebecca's Mack engine started immediately and ran perfectly with all operating parameters within normal ranges. Her fuel pressure readings were steady, exhaust temperatures were appropriate, and the engine's electronic systems showed no fault codes or operational issues. The emergency team performed a complete post-repair inspection, checking all related systems and verifying that her truck was safe for continued operation in the severe weather conditions. Supervisor Hayes provided Rebecca with a service report documenting the work performed, including part numbers, labor time, and warranty information for the replacement component. However, when Rebecca attempted to pay for the emergency repair service, Supervisor Hayes informed her that no payment was required because her truck was covered under a federal emergency assistance program that provided free repairs to commercial vehicles carrying critical medical supplies during declared weather emergencies. He explained that the program was administered through the Department of Transportation in coordination with the Federal Emergency Management Agency to ensure that essential goods continued moving during severe weather events that threatened public health and safety. Rebecca resumed her journey at 7:42 a.m. with her truck operating perfectly and her medical cargo maintaining proper temperature throughout the repair process. However, As she continued through West Virginia toward her delivery destinations, she began experiencing concerns about the emergency repair service she had received. Her attempts to verify the Federal Emergency Assistance Program mentioned by Supervisor Hayes led to government agencies that had no knowledge of such a program. And her inquiries about emergency road service coverage were met with confusion about the services she described receiving. Most disturbing was Rebecca's discovery that the replacement electronic control module installed by the emergency team was performing beyond manufacturer specifications. Her fuel economy improved by nearly 15% compared to her previous averages. Her engine was producing more power and torque than factory ratings indicated, and her emissions control systems were operating with efficiency levels that exceeded EPA certification standards. When she contacted her Mac dealer to inquire about the enhanced performance characteristics, service technicians found that the electronic control module contained programming and calibration data that weren't available through official Mac service procedures. Rebecca completed her insulin delivery successfully, but immediately sought verification of the emergency repair service through official channels. Her inquiries with the West Virginia Department of Transportation revealed that no Emergency Road Service Division was operating in the area where she had received assistance, and no DOT personnel were assigned to provide roadside repairs during the time period when she had encountered the emergency team. Badge number 2847 belonged to a retired DOT supervisor who had passed away in 2019, and the service report provided by Supervisor Hayes contained formatting and authorization codes that weren't used by any current government agency. Analysis of the replacement electronic control module by Mac engineers revealed that the component contained technology and programming capabilities that weren't available through any authorized supplier or aftermarket manufacturer. The control module's internal circuitry utilized materials and design concepts that were significantly more advanced than current automotive electronics, and its operational characteristics suggested access to proprietary information that was classified by engine manufacturers. Most significantly, the component appeared to be designed specifically for Rebecca's individual truck, with customized programming that optimized performance for her specific driving patterns, cargo requirements, and route characteristics. Rebecca Stone continues operating her truck, which has maintained enhanced performance capabilities since the emergency repair. But she has been unable to locate any official record of the Federal Emergency Assistance Program or the DOT personnel who provided the service. Her incident report has been forwarded to federal transportation authorities and is under active investigation as part of a broader inquiry into unauthorized emergency services operating in the Appalachian region. The electronic control module installed during her roadside repair continues to operate beyond manufacturer specifications, and multiple attempts to reverse engineer the component have been unsuccessful due to its advanced design and proprietary technology. Let's move to our sixth story. Our sixth account comes from Carlos Mendez, a long-haul specialist with 18 years of experience running dedicated freight routes across the eastern corridor of the United States. Known throughout his company for his exceptional situational awareness and defensive driving techniques, Carlos operated a 2017 Peterbilt 389 with a Caterpillar C15 engine and maintained an exemplary safety record with 0 preventable accidents in nearly 2 decades of professional driving. He specialized in hauling construction materials and heavy machinery that required expert load securement and precise navigation through challenging terrain. On the night of August 12, 2023, at exactly 2:10 a.m., Carlos was running Interstate 64 through the serpentine curves of Kentucky's mountain region when he encountered another commercial vehicle that would challenge everything he understood about identity, reality, and the physics of highway transportation. Carlos had been hauling a load of steel I-beams from a fabrication facility in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to a construction project in Lexington, Kentucky. following his standard route through the Appalachian highlands that offered the most efficient path for his 48-foot flatbed trailer carrying 44,800 pounds of structural steel. The night was clear with excellent visibility, temperatures holding steady at 52 degrees, and traffic conditions were ideal for making good time through the winding mountain highways. His load was properly secured with grade 8 chains and binders according to DOT regulations. His truck was running flawlessly with all systems operating within normal parameters, and his electronic logbook showed he had adequate driving time remaining to complete his delivery on schedule, without violating hours of service requirements. As Carlos navigated through the particularly challenging section of Interstate 64, known locally as the Devil's Backbone, due to its sharp curves and steep grades, he observed headlights in his mirrors that appeared to belong to another tractor-trailer combination following at a reasonable distance behind him. The following truck seemed to be maintaining proper spacing and speed for the mountain conditions, which Carlos appreciated as an example of professional driving courtesy that had become less common among newer drivers entering the industry. However, as he continued through the series of S-curves that characterize this section of Kentucky Highway, Carlos began noticing unusual characteristics about the following truck that didn't align with normal traffic patterns or driving behaviors. The first anomaly Carlos observed was that the following truck was matching his speed and following distance with mathematical precision that exceeded normal driving capabilities. When Carlos would reduce his speed for sharp curves, the following truck would decelerate at exactly the same rate and maintain identical spacing. When he accelerated out of turns or climbed grades, the following truck would match his acceleration patterns perfectly, maintaining the same distance relationship regardless of changing road conditions or traffic situations. The synchronization was so precise that Carlos began wondering if the following driver was using some form of advanced cruise control or electronic following system that he wasn't familiar with from his years of experience with commercial vehicle technology. As the highway straightened through a valley section near mile marker 91, Carlos was able to observe the following truck more clearly in his West Coast mirrors, and was shocked to discover that the vehicle appeared to be an identical match to his own Peterbilt 389. The truck had the same color scheme, the same cab configuration, the same sleeper box design, and appeared to be pulling the same type of flatbed trailer loaded with what looked like identical steel cargo. Even more disturbing was Carlos's observation that the following truck's license plate numbers seemed to match his own registration, though the distance and lighting conditions made it difficult to verify the exact characters with complete certainty. Carlos contacted other drivers on CB Channel 19 to ask if anyone else was observing the matching trucks, describing his location and the unusual situation he was experiencing. Several truckers responded with their current positions, but none reported seeing two identical Peterbilt tractors in the area, and their mile marker call-outs placed them at locations that should have given them clear visibility of Carlos's position and the following truck. One driver specifically stated that he could see Carlos's Peterbilt clearly, but observed no other commercial vehicles in the immediate area. Despite Carlos's continued visual confirmation that the identical truck was following approximately 200 feet behind him. At mile marker 96, Carlos decided to conduct a test to determine if the following truck was being operated by an actual driver or if he was experiencing some form of optical illusion caused by highway hypnosis or fatigue. He activated his turn signal and began moving into the passing lane as if to overtake a slower vehicle, despite the fact that there was no traffic ahead of him requiring such a maneuver. The identical truck behind him immediately activated its turn signal in perfect synchronization and began moving into the passing lane, matching Carlos's lateral movement with precise timing and positioning that suggested the following driver could somehow anticipate his intentions before he executed his driving maneuvers. Carlos returned to the right lane and observed that the following truck also returned to the right lane at exactly the same time. maintaining perfect synchronization with his movements. He then tested the following truck's responses by making several additional lane changes, adjusting his speed in various patterns, and activating different combinations of lights and signals. In every case, the identical truck responded instantly and perfectly, matching Carlos's actions with timing that seemed to defy normal human reaction capabilities, and suggested some form of mechanical or electronic connection between the two vehicles. Most unnervingly, when Carlos attempted to observe the driver of the following truck by adjusting his mirrors and using his cab's interior lighting to get a better view, he could see what appeared to be a figure in the driver's seat that looked remarkably similar to himself. The following driver appeared to be wearing the same style of clothing, had similar physical characteristics, and seemed to be making the same steering and operating movements that Carlos was making in his own cab. However, the lighting conditions and distance made it impossible for Carlos to confirm whether he was actually seeing another person who resembled him, or if some form of reflection or optical effect was creating the disturbing visual similarity. At a truck stop near the town of Moorhead, Kentucky, Carlos decided to pull in for fuel and to get a closer look at the identical truck that had been following him. He activated his turn signal well in advance and began the deceleration process for exiting the highway, watching in his mirrors to see how the following truck would respond. The identical vehicle also signaled and began exiting, maintaining perfect synchronization with Carlos's movements as they navigated the off-ramp and approached the truck stop facility. Carlos positioned his truck at a fuel island and immediately got out of his cab to observe the identical truck. But as he watched, the following vehicle continued past the fuel area and disappeared behind the truck stop building. Carlos walked around the entire truck stop facility to locate the identical truck, checking every parking area, fuel island, and service bay, but found no trace of the vehicle that had been following him for over 30 miles through the Kentucky mountains. He asked other drivers and truck stop employees if they had observed a Peterbilt identical to his own, but none of the people he spoke with had seen such a vehicle. The truck stop's security cameras covered all entrance and exit points, but when Carlos asked to review the footage, the recording showed only his own truck entering the facility with no other commercial vehicles arriving during the same time period. Carlos resumed his journey at 4:47 a.m., but as he merged back onto Interstate 64, the identical truck reappeared in his mirrors at exactly the same following distance and position it had maintained before his truck stop break. The synchronization resumed immediately, with the following truck matching his acceleration, speed, and lane positioning, with the same mathematical precision he had observed earlier. However, now the identical truck seemed to be displaying different behaviors that suggested its driver was trying to communicate something important to Carlos about his journey or his route. The following truck began using its headlights in what appeared to be deliberate signaling patterns, flashing high beams in sequences that seemed too organized to be random, but didn't correspond to any standard trucking communication codes that Carlos recognized. The light patterns became more frequent and insistent as they approached areas where the highway curved sharply or descended steep grades, as if the following driver was trying to warn Carlos about upcoming road hazards or dangerous conditions ahead. At mile marker 128, approximately 15 miles before Carlos's planned delivery destination in Lexington, the identical truck began flashing its headlights frantically and appeared to be trying to get Carlos's attention through increasingly dramatic signaling behaviors. The following truck was now alternating between high and low beams, activating its hazard flashers, and even using its air horn in patterns that clearly indicated urgent communication attempts. Carlos reduced his speed and tried to interpret what the following driver was attempting to communicate, when he observed that the identical truck's driver was making exaggerated gestures through his windshield. The following driver appeared to be pointing ahead and making stopping motions with his arms, as if warning Carlos to reduce speed or pull over immediately. Despite his confusion about the situation, Carlos decided to trust the apparent warning and began reducing his speed significantly while scanning the highway ahead for potential hazards. As he crested a hill near mile marker 131, Carlos discovered that the warning had been accurate. A massive tree had fallen across both lanes of Interstate 64, completely blocking traffic and creating an extremely dangerous situation for vehicles traveling at highway speeds in the pre-dawn darkness. Carlos was able to stop his 80,000-pound combination safely approximately 150 feet before the fallen tree, avoiding what would have been a catastrophic collision that could have resulted in serious injury or death. However, when he looked in his mirrors to acknowledge the following driver who had provided the life-saving warning, the identical truck had disappeared completely. Carlos got out of his cab and walked back along the shoulder to look for the following truck, but found no trace of the vehicle that had been following him consistently for over 60 miles through the Kentucky mountains. Kentucky State Police officers who responded to clear the fallen tree confirmed that Carlos's truck was the only commercial vehicle in the area when they arrived at the scene. Traffic camera footage from the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet showed Carlos's truck approaching and stopping before the tree, but recorded no other commercial vehicles on that section of Interstate 64. During the time frame when Carlos reported being followed by the identical truck, the tree that had fallen across the highway was determined to have been blocking traffic for less than 8 minutes before Carlos arrived, meaning that the warning he received had been timed with impossible precision to prevent his collision with the hazard. Analysis of Carlos's electronic logging device and GPS tracking data confirmed his account of the route he had traveled and the timing of his stops, but showed no interaction with other commercial vehicles during his journey through Kentucky. His CB radio communications had been recorded by his fleet management system, and the recordings confirmed his attempts to contact other drivers about the following truck, but also documented that no other drivers reported seeing the vehicle he was describing. Carlos Mendez completed his delivery successfully, but filed a comprehensive report with Kentucky State Police and his company's safety department regarding the incident with the identical truck. His account has been forwarded to federal transportation authorities as part of an ongoing investigation into unexplained phenomena affecting commercial drivers in the Appalachian region. Carlos continues driving professionally, but reports that he occasionally still observes the identical truck in his mirrors during nighttime runs through Kentucky, always maintaining the same precise following distance, and always disappearing before he can make direct contact with the mysterious driver who may have saved his life. Let's move to our 7th story. Our 7th account comes from Patricia "Pat" O'Brien, a veteran female trucker with 25 years of experience hauling specialty cargo across the continental United States. Known throughout the industry for her meticulous record-keeping and absolute compliance with federal hours of service regulations, Patricia operated a 2016 Kenworth T680 with a Picard MX-13 engine and maintained perfect logbook documentation that had never been questioned during DOT inspections. In over 2 decades of professional driving, she specialized in transporting oversized industrial equipment that required precise route planning and detailed coordination with state permit authorities. On the night of May 17, 2023, at approximately 12:45 a.m., Patricia was running U.S. Route 23 through the remote hollows of eastern Kentucky when she discovered a handwritten entry in her electronic logbook that would challenge everything she understood about time, documentation, and the mysterious forces operating in the Appalachian wilderness. Patricia had been hauling a massive industrial generator from a manufacturing facility in Louisville, Kentucky, to a power plant construction site in Virginia. Following a carefully planned route through the mountainous terrain that had been approved by permit authorities in 3 different states, her load measured 14 feet wide, 16 feet high, and weighed 127,000 pounds, requiring escort vehicles, special routing, and travel only during designated nighttime hours to minimize traffic disruption. The generator represented critical infrastructure for rural communities that had been without reliable electrical service for months following storm damage, making her delivery essential for restoring power to hospitals, schools, and emergency services throughout the region. Patricia's electronic logbook system was a state-of-the-art Qualcomm unit that automatically recorded her driving time, location data, and vehicle status information in compliance with federal electronic logging device regulations. The system was tamper-proof with encrypted data transmission and required biometric authentication for all manual entries, ensuring that her hours of service documentation was accurate and legally compliant. Throughout her 25-year career, Patricia had never experienced any technical problems with electronic logging systems and had developed a reputation among DOT enforcement officers for maintaining documentation that exceeded regulatory requirements for accuracy and completeness. As Patricia navigated through the particularly challenging section of U.S. Route 23, known locally as the Devil's Backbone, due to its narrow lanes and sharp elevation changes, she stopped at the Paintsville Way Station for a mandatory permit inspection and measurement verification. During the inspection process, she accessed her electronic logbook to provide driving time documentation to the Kentucky DOT officer conducting the oversized load review. However, when she opened her logbook application, Patricia discovered a handwritten entry that she had never made and that shouldn't have been possible to create using her electronic logging system. The mysterious logbook entry was dated May 17, 1987, exactly 36 years earlier to the day, and documented a trip from Louisville to Virginia, following the identical route that Patricia was currently traveling. The entry was written in handwriting that appeared remarkably similar to her own penmanship, using the same abbreviations and documentation style that she had developed over her career. Most disturbing was that the entry described hauling the same type of industrial generator to the same destination, with load dimensions and weight specifications that exactly matched her current cargo manifest and permit documentation. The 1987 logbook entry included detailed notes about road conditions, weather patterns, and route challenges that were impossible for anyone to have known in advance. The entry warned about a bridge weight restriction on Route 460 that wouldn't be implemented until 1994, mentioned construction delays on Interstate 64 that were part of a highway improvement project completed in 1991, and referenced GPS coordinates for alternate routing that used technology that wouldn't become available to commercial drivers until the early 2000s. The level of detail and accuracy in the 36-year-old entry suggested knowledge of future events and technological developments that couldn't possibly have existed in 1987. Patricia contacted her fleet dispatcher to report the technical malfunction with her electronic logging device. But when Qualcomm technical support accessed her logbook remotely, they confirmed that her system was operating normally with no evidence of data corruption or unauthorized access. The handwritten entry appeared in their database with proper timestamp authentication and digital signatures that indicated legitimate manual entry creation, despite the fact that Patricia's logging device hadn't been manufactured until 2019 and the software platform didn't exist in 1987. Technical analysis of the entry's metadata showed creation timestamps that preceded the development of electronic logging technology by over 3 decades. The Kentucky DOT officer conducting Patricia's permit inspection was also able to view the mysterious logbook entry on his enforcement tablet, and he confirmed that the documentation appeared legitimate according to his system's verification protocols. However, when he attempted to cross-reference the 1987 entry with historical DOT records, he discovered that no permits had been issued for oversized loads matching Patricia's current cargo during May 1987, and no driver named Patricia O'Brien had been licensed to operate commercial vehicles in Kentucky during that time period. The officer's investigation revealed that Patricia would have been only 8 years old in 1987, making it impossible for her to have created the logbook entry. Most unnervingly, the 1987 logbook entry included specific predictions about Patricia's current journey that began proving accurate as she continued her route through eastern Kentucky. The entry warned about a landslide blocking her planned route near mile marker 47, mentioned that her escort vehicles would experience communication problems in the Jenny Wiley State Park area, and predicted that she would encounter a law enforcement checkpoint near the Virginia border that would require additional permit verification. The entry also included personal details about Patricia's life that were accurate but impossible for anyone to have known in 1987, including references to her future marriage, her daughter's college graduation, and business decisions she had made just months before her current trip. As Patricia continued following the route documented in the mysterious 1987 logbook entry, every prediction and warning began manifesting with disturbing accuracy. At mile marker 47, she encountered road crews clearing debris from a landslide that had occurred approximately 2 hours earlier, forcing her to follow the exact alternate route that had been described in the 36-year-old documentation. Her escort vehicles did indeed lose radio communication in the mountainous terrain near Jenny Wiley State Park, requiring her to use the backup communication procedures that had been detailed in the 1987 entry with impossible precision. The law enforcement checkpoint near the Virginia border materialized exactly as predicted, with Virginia State Police conducting enhanced inspections of oversized loads due to intelligence about permit violations that had been reported earlier that evening. Patricia's 1987 logbook entry had included specific advice about presenting her documentation and had warned her to carry backup copies of permits that the officers would request. Information that proved essential for expediting her inspection and avoiding significant delays that could have jeopardized her delivery schedule. Most disturbing was Patricia's discovery that the 1987 logbook entry continued to update itself with new information as her journey progressed. When she checked her electronic logging device after clearing the Virginia checkpoint, she found that additional handwritten notes had appeared in the 36-year-old entry, providing updated predictions about road conditions, weather changes, and routing adjustments that would be necessary to complete her delivery successfully. The new notes were written in the same handwriting style and used the same terminology, as if they were being added by the same person who had created the original 1987 entry. The updating logbook entry began providing increasingly personal guidance that went beyond simple route planning and load transportation. The handwritten notes included advice about business decisions Patricia was considering, warned her about potential mechanical problems with her truck that hadn't yet manifested, and provided specific instructions about contacting family members regarding situations that hadn't occurred but would require her immediate attention within the following weeks. The entries seemed to demonstrate knowledge of Patricia's future that extended far beyond her current trip and suggested access to information about events that hadn't yet happened. At approximately 4:30 a.m., Patricia reached her delivery destination at the Virginia power plant construction site, where the industrial generator was successfully offloaded and positioned according to the customer's specifications. However, during the unloading process, construction supervisors mentioned that they had been expecting her arrival based on scheduling information they had received from a previous delivery of identical equipment that had occurred at the same location in May 1987. The supervisors showed Patricia documentation from their project archives, indicating that an industrial generator matching her current cargo had been delivered 36 years earlier by a driver whose signature on the delivery receipt appeared identical to Patricia's own handwriting. Patricia's investigation of the construction project records revealed that the power plant had indeed received a generator delivery in May 1987. But the facility had been destroyed by flooding in 1994 and completely rebuilt with different equipment specifications. The generator that had been delivered in 1987 should have been removed during the reconstruction process. But construction crews confirmed that they had discovered the original generator still in position and fully operational when they began the current project. The 36-year-old equipment was generating electricity efficiently despite having no maintenance records and showing no signs of wear or deterioration from decades of continuous operation. Most significantly, the delivery receipt from 1987 contained Patricia's signature and contact information, including her current cell phone number and the license plate number of the Kenworth T680 that she was currently driving. The 1987 documentation also included her current DOT medical certificate number and commercial driver's license information that wouldn't be issued to her until 1998, when she first entered the trucking industry as a 19-year-old rookie driver. Construction supervisors confirmed that the 1987 delivery receipt had been stored in their archives continuously since the original generator installation and showed no signs of recent alteration or document tampering. Patricia completed her delivery and immediately contacted federal transportation authorities to report the impossible logbook entry and the historical documentation that seemed to connect her current trip to events that had occurred decades before her birth. Analysis of her electronic logging device by Qualcomm engineers revealed that the handwritten entry was integrated into her system's database at the firmware level, making it impossible to delete or modify using standard software procedures. The entry appeared to be a fundamental part of her logging device's operational code, as if it had been present since the device's initial programming and activation. Federal investigators discovered that similar logbook anomalies had been reported by other commercial drivers operating in the Appalachian region, all involving handwritten entries that predicted future events and provided guidance for avoiding transportation hazards. In every case, the mysterious entries were dated decades in the past, but contained information about current trips and contemporary technology that shouldn't have existed when the entries were supposedly created. All affected drivers were female owner-operators with extensive experience in oversized load transportation, and all had discovered the entries while traveling through the same section of eastern Kentucky, where Patricia had first observed her 1987 documentation. Patricia O'Brien continues operating her trucking business, but reports that the 1987 logbook entry remains active in her electronic logging system and continues providing accurate predictions about her trips through the Appalachian region. Her incident has been classified by federal transportation authorities as part of an ongoing investigation into temporal anomalies affecting commercial drivers in mountainous areas, where time itself appears to operate according to different rules than conventional physics would predict. Patricia's current logbook now contains entries dated as far back as 1952 and as far forward as 2087. All written in her own handwriting and all providing information that proves accurate despite being impossible for her to have known through conventional means. Let's move to our 8th story. Our 8th account comes from Anthony Tony Castellano, an experienced hauler with 20 years of professional driving experience specializing in chemical transportation and hazardous materials across the southeastern United States. Known throughout his company for his exceptional safety record and comprehensive knowledge of DOT regulations governing dangerous goods transport, Tony operated a 2020 Freightliner Cascadia with a Cummins X15 engine pulling a specialized tanker trailer designed for corrosive chemical transport. He maintained perfect compliance with all federal hazmat regulations and had never received a violation during the hundreds of DOT inspections he had undergone throughout his career. On the night of January 9th, 2024, at exactly 10:30 p.m., Tony was hauling a load of industrial acids through the remote inspection station on Route 421 in Harlan County, Kentucky. When he encountered a DOT inspector who would demonstrate impossible knowledge about violations that had never occurred and cargo he had never transported. Tony had been hauling 6,200 gallons of sulfuric acid from a chemical processing plant in Mobile, Alabama, to manufacturing facilities throughout the Ohio River Valley, following his standard route through the Appalachian mountain corridors that provided the most efficient path for hazardous materials transport while avoiding major population centers. His tanker trailer was equipped with specialized safety systems, including emergency shutoff valves, vapor recovery equipment, and spillage containment systems that exceeded federal requirements for corrosive chemical transport. The weather was clear with temperatures at 28 degrees, ideal conditions for maintaining proper chemical storage temperatures and ensuring safe handling of dangerous cargo through challenging mountain terrain. Tony's hazmat documentation was complete and current, including his CDL endorsements, medical certificates, hazmat security clearance, and chemical compatibility charts that verified his trailer's suitability for sulfuric acid transport. His shipping papers documented the exact chemical composition, concentration levels, and emergency response procedures required by DOT regulations. And his vehicle was equipped with proper placarding, emergency response guidebooks, and communication equipment for reporting hazmat incidents to federal authorities. Throughout his 20-year career, Tony had developed a reputation among DOT enforcement officers for maintaining documentation standards that consistently exceeded regulatory requirements. The Harlan County Inspection Station was a routine stop that Tony had used dozens of times over the years for mandatory hazmat vehicle inspections and documentation reviews. The facility operated 24 hours a day, with certified DOT officers trained in dangerous goods regulations and equipped with specialized testing equipment for verifying chemical transport compliance. Tony activated his hazard flashers and pulled into the inspection bay, following standard procedures for hazmat vehicle processing that he had performed hundreds of times throughout his career without incident or complication. A uniformed DOT inspector emerged from the station building and approached Tony's cab with a digital tablet and inspection clipboard, identifying himself as Inspector Michael Davidson, badge number 7239, with specialized certification in hazardous materials enforcement. Inspector Davidson appeared professional and knowledgeable, wearing a properly pressed DOT uniform with all required insignia, and carrying inspection equipment that Tony recognized from previous encounters with legitimate enforcement officers. The inspector began the routine verification process by requesting Tony's commercial driver's license, medical card, hazmat endorsements, and chemical transport documentation. However, as Inspector Davidson reviewed Tony's paperwork, he began citing violations and safety infractions that Tony had never committed and that weren't reflected in any official enforcement records. The inspector referenced a hazmat spill incident that Tony had allegedly been involved in near Memphis, Tennessee, 3 months earlier, providing specific details about chemical contamination, cleanup costs, and federal penalties that Tony knew had never occurred. Inspector Davidson mentioned improper placarding violations during a previous inspection in Georgia, citing regulation numbers and fine amounts for infractions that Tony had never been charged with. Most disturbing was Inspector Davidson's knowledge of Tony's driving history and personal information that went far beyond what should have been available in DOT enforcement databases. He mentioned Tony's wife, Maria's recent medical treatments, specifically referencing her chemotherapy schedule and prescription medication regimen for cancer treatment that she was receiving at a private oncology clinic. He asked about Tony's son Michael's military deployment to Afghanistan, including details about his unit assignment and expected return date that weren't part of any public record. The inspector knew about Tony's mortgage refinancing, his daughter's college tuition payments, and business decisions he had made regarding equipment purchases that hadn't been finalized. Inspector Davidson then began discussing cargo loads that Tony had allegedly transported, but that he knew he had never hauled in his 20-year career. The inspector referenced a shipment of radioactive materials from a nuclear facility in South Carolina, providing specific isotope designations, container numbers, and radiation exposure readings that Tony had no knowledge of. He mentioned transporting biological hazards from a CDC laboratory in Atlanta, describing containment protocols and decontamination procedures for materials that Tony had never encountered. Each fictional cargo load was described with technical accuracy and regulatory detail that demonstrated extensive knowledge of hazmat transportation requirements. Most unnervingly, Inspector Davidson began discussing future cargo assignments that Tony hadn't received, but that would be dispatched to him within the following weeks. He warned Tony about a chemical compatibility problem with a load of industrial solvents that he would be assigned to transport from Louisiana to Tennessee, providing specific mixing hazards and safety precautions for chemicals that weren't currently part of Tony's schedule. He advised Tony to refuse a particular shipment of corrosive materials that would be offered at an unusually high rate, mentioning that the customer had a history of mislabeling dangerous goods and had caused environmental contamination incidents that resulted in federal prosecution. Inspector Davidson's predictions extended beyond cargo assignments to include mechanical problems with Tony's truck that hadn't yet manifested. He advised Tony to have his tanker trailer's safety relief valves inspected within the next 2 weeks, stating that one valve was developing a leak that could cause dangerous pressure buildup during chemical transport. He mentioned that Tony's truck would experience turbocharger problems during his next trip through mountain terrain, providing specific symptoms and recommended repair procedures for issues that hadn't occurred. The inspector seemed to have detailed knowledge of Tony's truck's future mechanical condition that extended months into the future. During the inspection process, Inspector Davidson accessed Tony's electronic logging device and pointed out hours of service violations that Tony had never committed. The inspector showed him logbook entries that documented driving time exceeding federal limits, off-duty periods that were shorter than required, and rest break violations that Tony knew were inaccurate. However, when Tony looked at his logbook display, he could see the violations that Inspector Davidson was referencing. Despite knowing that he had never exceeded hours of service regulations during his entire career, the false violations appeared to be integrated into his electronic logging system in ways that made them indistinguishable from legitimate entries. Inspector Davidson completed his inspection and informed Tony that he was being placed out of service for multiple violations that required immediate correction before he could continue transporting hazardous materials. The inspector provided Tony with a violation notice that listed infractions spanning several years of fictitious incidents, including chemical spills, improper documentation, equipment failures, and hours of service violations that Tony had never committed. The notice included fine amounts totaling over $47,000 and referenced a hearing date for federal charges that could result in permanent suspension of his hazmat endorsements. However, when Tony requested clarification about the violations and asked to contact his company's safety department to verify the inspection results, Inspector Davidson explained that the violations were part of a federal investigation into systematic hazmat safety failures that required immediate enforcement action. He stated that Tony's driving privileges were suspended pending completion of mandatory safety training and payment of accumulated fines that had been building for years without proper notification. The inspector provided Tony with contact information for federal agencies that would handle his case and warned him that failure to comply with the enforcement action could result in criminal prosecution. Tony was forced to park his truck at the inspection station and arrange for alternative transportation. But as he prepared to secure his vehicle and hazmat cargo, Inspector Davidson provided him with specific instructions for handling his chemical load that demonstrated impossible technical knowledge. The inspector knew the exact chemical composition of Tony's sulfuric acid, including impurity levels and manufacturing batch numbers that weren't listed on his shipping documentation. He provided detailed procedures for neutralizing potential spills using chemicals that weren't part of Tony's emergency response kit, but that would be perfectly effective for handling sulfuric acid contamination. Most significantly, Inspector Davidson warned Tony about a chemical reaction that would occur if his current load came into contact with sodium compounds that would be present during a loading accident that would happen at his next scheduled pickup location. The inspector provided specific instructions for preventing the reaction and advised Tony to carry additional safety equipment that wasn't required by regulations, but would be essential for protecting workers during the incident. The level of technical detail and future knowledge demonstrated by Inspector Davidson exceeded anything that Tony had encountered during legitimate DOT inspections. After spending nearly 4 hours at the inspection station trying to resolve the violation issues, Tony was finally released when Inspector Davidson determined that his immediate safety concerns had been addressed. However, the violation notice remained active, and Tony was required to report to federal authorities within 30 days to begin the process of resolving the accumulated infractions. Inspector Davidson provided Tony with a business card containing his contact information and advised him to call if he encountered any problems during his remaining journey through Kentucky. Tony resumed his trip at 3:15 a.m. But every prediction that Inspector Davidson had made began proving accurate with disturbing precision. His turbocharger did indeed begin showing signs of failure during his climb through mountain terrain, requiring exactly the repair procedures that the inspector had described. The chemical compatibility problem with his next load manifested exactly as predicted, with dangerous mixing potential. That would have caused a serious safety incident if Tony hadn't been prepared with the additional equipment that Inspector Davidson had recommended. Most unnervingly, the loading accident at Tony's next pickup location occurred exactly as Inspector Davidson had warned, with sodium compound contamination that would have created a dangerous chemical reaction if Tony hadn't followed the specific safety procedures the inspector had provided. Tony's preparation prevented what could have been a catastrophic hazmat incident, but the accuracy of Inspector Davidson's predictions raised questions about how the DOT officer could have possessed such detailed knowledge of future events. When Tony attempted to contact Inspector Davidson using the business card he had been provided, the phone numbers led to recordings stating that the numbers were no longer in service. Tony's inquiries with the Kentucky DOT revealed that no inspector named Michael Davidson was currently employed by the department, and badge number 7239 had been retired from service in 2018. The Harlan County Inspection Station confirmed that no DOT officers had been on duty during the time period when Tony claimed to have been inspected, and security cameras showed his truck parked at the facility for nearly 4 hours with no evidence of any inspection activity. Investigation of Tony's violation notice by federal transportation authorities revealed that the document contained accurate DOT formatting and authorization codes, but referenced infractions that weren't recorded in any official enforcement database. The violations described in the notice matched real regulatory citations, but the incidents they documented had never occurred according to comprehensive review of Tony's driving record and company safety files. Most significantly, the fine amounts and hearing dates listed on the violation notice were for infractions that wouldn't be processed by federal courts until several months in the future. Tony Castellano continues operating as a hazmat driver, but reports that he occasionally receives updates about his violation status through official DOT channels, despite the fact that no legitimate violations exist in his record. His incident has been classified by federal transportation authorities as part of an ongoing investigation into unauthorized enforcement activities affecting commercial drivers in the Appalachian region, where DOT inspectors who don't officially exist continue conducting inspections. that predict future events with impossible accuracy, while issuing violations for incidents that exist only in alternate versions of reality. Let's move to our ninth and final story. Our final account reveals how all 8 previous incidents are connected through a pattern that federal authorities have been investigating in secret for over 4 decades. This verified story involves all the drivers you've heard about tonight, as they received identical dispatch calls directing them to converge at a single location deep in the Appalachian National Forest. On February 14, 2024, at exactly 11:11 p.m., Vincent McKenzie, Amanda Torres, Marcus Jackson, Danny Rodriguez, Rebecca Stone, Carlos Mendez, Patricia O'Brien, and Anthony Castellano all received emergency dispatch orders that would expose them to the truth behind decades of unexplained phenomena affecting professional drivers in America's most remote mountain corridors. The dispatch calls originated from what appeared to be legitimate freight brokers and transportation companies that each driver had worked with previously. But subsequent investigation revealed that all contact numbers traced back to a single communication hub operating from an undisclosed location within the Daniel Boone National Forest. Each driver received nearly identical instructions. Proceed immediately to GPS coordinates 37.2431 degrees north, 83.8918 degrees west for an emergency freight pickup involving critical medical supplies that required immediate transport to disaster relief operations. The dispatch offers included premium rates that were 300% above standard freight charges, with additional compensation for the emergency nature and remote pickup location. Vincent McKenzie was contacted while deadheading through Ohio after completing a delivery to Cleveland, with his dispatcher explaining that the emergency freight involved replacement diesel engines for generators providing power to storm-damaged hospitals throughout eastern Kentucky. Amanda Torres received her dispatch while hauling construction equipment through West Virginia, with instructions to pick up oversized medical equipment that required her specialized permit authority and heavy haul expertise. Marcus Jackson was directed to collect temperature-controlled pharmaceutical supplies using his refrigerated trailer, while Danny Rodriguez was assigned to transport communication equipment for emergency response coordination efforts. Rebecca Stone's dispatch involved critical repair parts for disabled emergency vehicles. Carlos Mendez was assigned to haul structural materials for temporary shelter construction. Patricia O'Brien received orders to transport industrial generators for emergency power restoration. And Anthony Castellano was instructed to pick up chemical water treatment supplies for disaster relief operations. Each driver's assignment matched their specialized equipment and endorsements perfectly, suggesting detailed knowledge of their capabilities and current locations that should have been confidential information available only to their individual companies and dispatch centers. The GPS coordinates provided to all 8 drivers led to a location approximately 47 miles southeast of Hazard, Kentucky, accessible only through a series of increasingly narrow mountain roads that weren't suitable for commercial vehicle traffic according to standard trucking atlases. However, each driver's navigation system provided detailed routing instructions that bypassed weight restrictions, low bridges, and narrow passages that should have prevented tractor-trailer access to the remote coordinates. The suggested routes followed logging roads, mining access paths, and forest service trails that had been upgraded with concrete surfaces and reinforced bridges capable of supporting 80,000-pound commercial vehicles. Vincent arrived at the coordinates first, at approximately 1:47 a.m. on February 15th, and discovered a sophisticated logistics facility hidden in a valley surrounded by dense forest that wasn't visible from aerial photography or satellite imagery. The facility consisted of multiple loading docks, a dispatch center with advanced communication equipment, and parking areas designed to accommodate dozens of tractor-trailer combinations. Most significantly, The facility was staffed by personnel wearing uniforms from various government agencies, including the Department of Transportation, Federal Emergency Management Agency, Department of Defense, and agencies that Vincent didn't recognize, but that appeared to have official authority and security clearances. Amanda Torres arrived 37 minutes later, followed by Marcus Jackson, Danny Rodriguez, Rebecca Stone, Carlos Mendez, Patricia O'Brien, and Anthony Castellano at approximately 15-minute intervals throughout the early morning hours. Each driver was directed to a specific loading dock where their trailers were loaded with cargo that matched their dispatch instructions. But the loading process was conducted by personnel using equipment and procedures that exceeded anything the drivers had experienced at legitimate freight facilities. The loading crews used advanced forklifts that operated silently, handled cargo with impossible precision, and completed loading operations in a fraction of the time required by conventional methods. During the loading process, facility personnel demonstrated detailed knowledge about each driver's previous experiences with unexplained phenomena throughout the Appalachian region. A supervisor identified as Director Sarah Chen, Security Clearance Level 7, explained that the drivers had been selected for participation in Operation Mountain Gate, a federal research program that had been monitoring commercial vehicle operators for evidence of what she described as temporal displacement events and consciousness transfer phenomena occurring within specific geographic corridors of the Appalachian mountain system. Director Chen revealed that the phantom engines experienced by Vincent McKenzie were the result of his truck temporarily occupying the same physical space as identical vehicles from alternate timeline branches, creating acoustic feedback between dimensional variants of his Cummins X15 power plant. Amanda Torres's encounter with the weigh station attendant involved interaction with DOT personnel from a parallel reality where transportation infrastructure had developed along different technological pathways, resulting in cross-dimensional information exchange that allowed Inspector Morrison to access knowledge about Amanda's personal life from alternate versions of herself. The phantom load experienced by Marcus Jackson was explained as his trailer temporarily containing cargo that existed in quantum superposition, occupying multiple realities simultaneously until observation collapsed the wave function and returned the trailer to its empty state in the primary timeline. Danny Rodriguez's CB radio had been receiving transmissions from communication networks operating in parallel dimensions where geographical features and highway systems had developed differently, allowing voices from alternate realities to provide directions to locations that existed in their dimensional framework, but not in the primary timeline. Rebecca Stone's encounter with the emergency repair team involved personnel who had successfully developed limited time travel capabilities and were operating under federal authorization to prevent transportation accidents that would have cascading effects on critical supply chains throughout multiple timeline branches. Carlos Mendez had been followed by his own truck from a parallel dimension where he had made different route choices, with the alternate version of himself attempting to communicate warnings about upcoming hazards that existed in both dimensional frameworks simultaneously. Patricia O'Brien's logbook entries were being created by alternate versions of herself from different timeline branches, where she had made the same trips under different historical circumstances, with information flowing between dimensional variants through quantum entanglement effects that connected identical individuals across parallel realities. Anthony Castellano's duty inspector existed in a reality where transportation enforcement had developed more comprehensive surveillance capabilities, allowing Inspector Davidson to access violation records and personal information from alternate timeline branches, where different versions of Tony had committed the infractions that were cited during his impossible inspection. Director Chen explained that Operation Mountain Gate had been established in 1952, following military reports of aircraft disappearing and reappearing in different locations throughout the Appalachian region, suggesting that the mountain terrain contained natural phenomena that affected the behavior of space-time and allowed interaction between parallel dimensional frameworks. The operation had expanded to include commercial vehicle monitoring after truckers began reporting increasingly frequent encounters with impossible situations that suggested systematic breakdown of dimensional barriers within specific geographic corridors. The 8 drivers were informed that they had been selected for enhanced monitoring because their previous experiences indicated natural sensitivity to dimensional fluctuations that made them valuable research subjects for understanding how consciousness and matter behaved when exposed to quantum instabilities occurring within the Appalachian mountain system. Their trucks had been equipped with advanced monitoring equipment disguised as standard DOT compliance devices, allowing federal researchers to collect data about dimensional transition events and their effects on human perception, mechanical systems, and electronic equipment. Director Chen revealed that similar facilities existed throughout the Appalachian region, staffed by personnel from various government agencies and private contractors working under classified authorization to study and potentially weaponize the dimensional phenomena that occurred naturally within the mountain corridors. The research program had documented over 12,000 separate incidents involving commercial drivers, private citizens, military personnel, and aircraft crews who had experienced impossible situations that challenged conventional understanding of physics, time, and reality itself. The cargo loaded onto each driver's trailer contained advanced monitoring equipment designed to collect additional data about dimensional fluctuations during their return journeys through the mountain corridors. The equipment was disguised as legitimate freight matching their dispatch instructions, but contained sensors, recording devices, and transmission equipment that would monitor their trucks and trailers for evidence of temporal displacement, consciousness transfer, and interaction with alternate dimensional frameworks during their travels through areas where dimensional barriers were known to be unstable. Each driver was provided with detailed routing instructions that would take them through specific geographic coordinates where dimensional phenomena were most likely to occur, with orders to maintain normal driving patterns regardless of any unusual experiences they might encounter. They were informed that their electronic logging devices, CB radios, GPS systems, and cell phones had been modified to record all communications, location data, and system anomalies that occurred during their assigned routes, with data transmission to federal research facilities occurring automatically through encrypted satellite links. The drivers were warned that discussing their experiences with unauthorized personnel could result in federal prosecution under national security statutes, and that their continued cooperation with Operation Mountain Gate was essential for protecting American transportation infrastructure from threats that existed beyond conventional understanding of reality and physics. They were advised that similar recruitment operations were ongoing throughout the country, with thousands of commercial drivers unknowingly participating in research programs designed to study and exploit dimensional phenomena occurring within specific geographic regions. At 6:23 a.m. on February 15th, 2024, all 8 drivers departed the facility following different routes that had been calculated to maximize their exposure to dimensional instability zones while maintaining the appearance of legitimate freight transportation. Subsequent tracking data confirmed that each driver experienced additional unexplained phenomena during their return journeys, with monitoring equipment documenting temporal anomalies, consciousness transfer events, and mechanical impossibilities that provided federal researchers with unprecedented data about the nature of reality within America's most mysterious mountain corridors. Federal investigation records obtained through classified document leaks reveal that Operation Mountain Gate continues expanding its research activities throughout the Appalachian region, with over 15,000 commercial drivers currently participating unknowingly in studies designed to understand and weaponize dimensional phenomena that challenge every assumption about the nature of time, space, and human consciousness. The program's ultimate objectives remain classified at levels that exceed conventional national security clearances, but evidence suggests that American military and intelligence agencies are developing capabilities that would allow them to manipulate reality itself using natural phenomena that occur within the ancient mountains, where the laws of physics operate according to different rules than the rest of our world. These 9 verified accounts reveal just a fraction of what's happening to professional drivers in America's Appalachian corridors. Federal authorities continue investigating these phenomena, but thousands of truckers are still encountering impossible situations on mountain highways every month. If you've experienced similar incidents while driving through remote areas, drop your story in the comments below. Every account gets investigated and could become our next verified episode. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell for more true horror stories that have been thoroughly researched and documented. Share this with other drivers in the trucking community. They need to know what's really happening on America's mountain roads. Keep your CB on Channel 19. Stay alert on those mountain passes. And remember, you're not alone in these experiences. Until next time, this is Declassified Horror, bringing you only the most disturbing true accounts.